Dragon Ball contains a number of objects that are instantly recognizable, starting with the orbs of power themselves, then moving on to the likes of the power pole, and finishing off of course with Hoi Poi capsules and Trunks' sword. On the other hand, the Scouters are one of the most memorable elements that we have ever come across to associate with the series over the course of our viewing experience. Those convenient all-purpose computers that you can simply wear over your eye and that have a wide variety of uses, the most noteworthy of them being of course counting power levels, and I know how much you love counting power levels. So let's look for some additional meta sources before we get into the specifics of the actual object though. Why exactly did the author choose to include Scouters in the story in the first place? You see, in an interview that took place in 2014 with Naho Oishii for Saikyo Jump, Toriyama discussed the background of the Scouters as follows. In the military realm, the word scout refers to reconnaissance. For example, a reconnaissance vehicle would be called a scout car. I tweaked that scout and gave it its name. In other words, it's a useful tool for the purposes of information gathering. The interviewer then asks, why did you come up with the Scouter item? My number one goal in coming up with it was because if an opponent's strength could be seen as a number, it would be very easy for the readers to understand when I put it in the comic. However, I could foresee that it would become an inconvenience for me down the line. Because if you knew a concrete number, then you could tell who would win and who would lose. So with regards to Goku and co, I decided that their power would change due to ki, and couldn't be adequately measured. In addition to all of this, it is a very useful item for generating danger. And also, here's another reason why Scouters are a thing. Ears. Yeah, that's one of the more comedic aspects of the Scouter, isn't it? Do Scouters have any hidden features, or features that you would have given them if you were to do it now? If the formal location of the enemy picked up by the Scouter were displayed in video, it would be even more perfect. But if you add features up to that point, it would get more difficult to do as manga story developments go. I'm not sure I should be saying this as the creator, but I wonder how Scouters are attached around the ear. I was always doubtful of it when I was drawing it. It would have to be strong enough to withstand sharp movements. I suppose there's no other way but to stick it on tight with something. Well, that's because it's alien technology. On Earth, the headset method, like the toy, is the right answer. Okay, so where exactly did the Scouters originate from within the world? Because we know that Saiyans didn't make it themselves. So, to begin once more, if we ask the author directly about the different kinds of Scouters on display, he'll of course be able to provide us with the information we need. They're the same in terms of features, the old and new, but have a different variety of aliens wearing them. But there are a bunch of different types of attachment parts too, depending on the position of the ear. If you're a soldier in Frieza's army, you can have one made to order to fit your ear, or maybe your entire head, or just almost like a visor. The different screen colours can be chosen to fit the peculiarities of different alien eyes as well, or to suit one's taste, sort of like lightsabers. Incidentally, its inventors were the Sufurians, or the Tuffles, the original inhabitants of planet Vegeta who were wiped out by the Saiyans. Originally, it was meant to be a device for the purposes of guarding against enemies and beasts, but Gichamu, a highly skilled engineer in Frieza's army, laid eyes on it and thought of something grander. He then went on to take that original Tuffle model and made modifications for concrete battle power numbers and telecommunications abilities. And of course, soldiers then began making use of it to carry out offensives. Now, some of that lore seems to run counter to what we know now, such as the promotional material for the Broly movie of 2018, implying that it wasn't Gichamu, it was Kikuno that actually created them. And then Gichamu's never been mentioned again. So basically, Kikuno made everything. I mean, to be fair, it's not impossible that Gichamu's character has morphed into Kikuno over the course of the series, nor is it entirely impossible that Toriyama simply forgot the character's original name. We know that he is guilty of forgetting things, and although we do not have any official confirmation that they are the same, nor do we know for certain whether or not Gichamu is actually still around or not, we've not had any concrete proof saying Gichamu is gone, or he's alive, we aren't going to proceed under the assumption that they are the same. At least for the foreseeable future, because we could easily see it change. We also know that in the time before that, people like the Saiyans made use of something a little bit more analog, scout scopes. It would appear that they were the ones who developed the technology first, so instead of them being the Tuffles, the Saiyans came up with something less elegant. So actually, in a way, you could almost say that Saiyans were like space pirates, because they had a telescope! Even though the Scouters are an impressive piece of machinery, they actually do have some limitations. Particularly well-trained individuals are able to easily hide their true power from the Scouters, and the Scouters just don't register it. Like the whole power level of 5 thing with Trunks, for example. Nevertheless, as we stated earlier in that interview with Toriyama, they were utilised in the early Dragon Ball Z series to introduce power scaling that took place within the universe. Even though it actually then became rendered obsolete very quickly, its effects can still be observed in modern times. Everyone talks about power levels, statistics, numbers, and Scouters are still synonymous with the series, even though now they're entirely useless. I will admit, I absolutely love statistics and numbers, and power levels are my jam. But I know that they're not the defining feature of Dragon Ball anymore. I mean, fans of other media could argue about who was stronger, Hulk or Thor, for an indefinite amount of time. But fans of Dragon Ball, up until at least the Trunks saga, had a way to measure that was more objective. And I think a lot of people still hanker for that type of environment. If you had a number, then there'd be no debate. At least maybe numbers that weren't in the billions. On the other hand, it seems that maintaining awareness of everything quickly became impossible. Again, billions. In addition to that, the power gaps that we saw on display that existed between the characters, it all started to get a little bit ridiculous. Here's a video that we made about this topic a few years ago. You can find it up top. And it was 5 years ago. Has it really been that long? The years have flown by, haven't they? But a lot of what we said back then is still relevant, so check it out. Furthermore, we have learned that they are capable of recording Scouters thanks to the likes of Granola, the Survivor's story arc in the manga. You know, that bit where Goku and Vegeta and the others could actually listen back to Bardock's fight with Gas? That was all recorded despite the Scouter being broken. It had enough juice left to be able to conveniently give that plot point to the characters. Also, and speaking of breaking, they were prone to doing that a lot. After reading the words of a particularly potent individual, traditional Scouters, and even the Scouters from the Resurrection F era, have all been known to break. Why does this happen to be the case? Toriyama comes to our aid once more with the solution to our problem. And given the fact that this is actually a fictional show, kind of makes sense when you hear it. To tell you the truth, says Toriyama, it's just a theatrical setup for a comic. In reality, it's digital, which renders it impossible. However, in terms of something analog, it's comparable to how a counter that is rising at a breakneck speed is unable to keep up and eventually breaks down. Even though it's completely fabricated for the sake of drama, it is interesting to note that the Scouters that were used during the Dragon Ball Super Broly era, it seems to have a certain safety feature that prevents them from counting more than 999,999 units of power, just under 1 million, and it most definitely piqued Lemo and Chilai's interest in Broly. We are also aware of a subtle subversion of the trope as well as a nod to it. As we mentioned earlier, they are available in a wide variety of forms and colours. However, aside from the scopes, there is a traditional green model that can be found on characters like Raditz, Bardock, and of course Captain Ginyu, and the rest of the Ginyu Force. On the other hand, we've witnessed red ones, more specifically those utilised by Vegeta and Frieza, the so-called new model. The blue ones that can be seen in Dragon Ball Super Broly, and of course Zarbon and Nappa wear them in Z. And then there's Tagama's version, which is an all-round piece instead of just being a singular eyepiece. I actually prefer that actually looks really cool. Xeno Trunks from Super Dragon Ball Heroes has his own green variant, which was developed by Capsule Corp because green, and features various enhancements. They're never completely detailed in regard to the capabilities that they possess though, aside from the more recent one that Frieza got from Ginyu. Therefore, even though there are distinctions between the models that take place in-universe, those differences, for the purposes of the manga and the anime, they're primarily for aesthetic purposes. Cosplayers and casual fans alike wear the Dragon Ball Scouters, as they're a popular piece of merchandise from the franchise. One of the more interesting ones though was added to the Dragon Ball Z handheld game, Scouter Batoru, in 1991, and an integral part of the gameplay to boot. Also in Japan in 2007, Dragon Ball Z Scouter vs Taikon Kamehameha, and due to the iconic nature of Scouters, they're also widely available as customization options across the board for all of your Xenoverses, your Fusions, your Breakers. It's just an easy thing to add to your character which screams Dragon Ball. The fact that it was seen for the first and last time in the original Dragon Ball manga when the character had a power level of 5 or something like that is like the most intriguing aspect of the Scouter. It started at 5, it ended at 5, with future Trunks. Yes, the first of these, of course, were our most beloved farmer who was armed with a shotgun, and last but not least was future Trunks, who is keeping his power a secret. Yes, that was the very last time we encountered one of those in the series. That obviously came before GT and Super. Whether or not Toriyama intended it to be the case, it actually loops quite nicely, as demonstrated that This device, which defined the Saiyan and Frieza sagas of the story, was now obsolete, as the power levels were now becoming so ridiculously high that it could not withstand power creep. Yet there's no point using them. I also do like the idea that it was foolish for Saiyans who were so reliant on power and battle and war that the thing that they used the most was completely subversive. That ki was so much better. It's also important to note that while the androids' power radars appear to be significantly more advanced and accurate, their ability to perform similar tasks appears to be comparable, which is further evidence of Dr. Giro's ingenuity. And note, that's what 16 has, not 17 and 18. They can't sense energy. However, it seems that power reading devices are only used for dramatic effect these days, not really for any practical purposes. And we do not anticipate that that's going to be changing anytime soon. Scouters will always be iconic though, but more so for their design and aesthetic flair that just reeks of early Dragon Ball Z, that even many people who are not familiar with the series itself do recognize it as coming from the show. Perhaps it's for the best this way, because every once in a while you just require something that just looks cool. We appreciate you for watching, and we hope to see you again for the next video. Catch you later!